In Annapolis, Maryland, Sarah Williams was known as a caring wife and mother. She and her husband, Tom, moved there 10 years ago to start a new life away from the hustle and bustle of the big city. Tom worked as an engineer at a local shipbuilding company, while Sarah, with her teaching background, decided to dedicate herself to home and raising their children. Sarah and Tom lived in a cozy 2-story house on Bayside Avenue. Their children, 6-year-old Jake and 4-year-old Lily, attended the local elementary school. Every morning, Sarah walked them to school and then went for a morning jog along the picturesque waterfront. The Williams family was an active part of the community. Sarah regularly attended local events and often volunteered at her children's school. Her passion for gardening was well known among the neighbors. Her garden was always in perfect order, and she frequently shared flowers and fresh vegetables with friends and neighbors. Tom was a workaholic, often staying late at work. His hobby was building model ships, and his workshop in the garage was full of unfinished projects. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time for family on weekends when they would go on picnics or fishing trips. To outsiders, Sarah and Tom's relationship seemed perfect, but close friends knew about the challenges they faced. Tom often came home tired and irritable, and their conversations frequently turned into arguments. Sarah sought solace in religion, which led her to St. John's Church, where she first met Father Michael. St. John's Church was the oldest in Annapolis and was located in the city center. Its massive oak doors and stained glass windows created an atmosphere of peace and tranquility. Here, Sarah found support among the parishioners and from Father Michael, who had recently moved to Annapolis to take over from the previous pastor. Father Michael was a charismatic and kind-hearted person who quickly earned the trust of the parishioners. His sermons were full of wisdom and inspiration, which particularly appealed to Sarah. Her visits to the church became more frequent, and her conversations with Father Michael grew deeper and more personal. On October 20th, 2022, Sarah began attending individual counseling sessions with Father Michael, hoping to find answers to her inner questions and cope with family difficulties. These meetings became a refuge for her, a place where she could be honest without fear of judgment. In recent months, Sarah increasingly felt growing tension in her relationship with Tom. He became more withdrawn and irritable after his company started a major project requiring long hours and significant effort. Their arguments became more frequent and painful, damaging their marriage. On the evening of November 5th, 2022, after yet another argument over disagreements about raising the children, Sarah realized she could no longer handle the problems alone. She felt her marriage was on the brink of collapse and decided to seek help from St. John's Church, hoping to find support and comfort there. Starting November 10th, 2022, Sarah began attending church services every Sunday, sitting in the back rows and trying to find solace in the words of the sermons. Father Michael's words, filled with understanding and compassion, particularly attracted her. His sermons addressed issues of family relationships, faith and forgiveness, deeply touching Sarah. On November 15th, 2022, after the service, Sarah decided to approach Father Michael and ask for a personal conversation. He invited her to his office, where she could openly talk about her problems for the first time. Father Michael listened to her with understanding and offered regular counseling to help her cope with her family difficulties. Regular meetings with Father Michael became a source of strength and hope for Sarah. Every week, she shared her worries and fears with him, finding support and comfort in his words. Father Michael became not only her spiritual mentor, but also a friend with whom she could openly talk about the most personal things. On the evening of November 25th, 2022, when Tom was once again late at work, Sarah felt particularly anxious and lonely. She decided to go to the church to talk to Father Michael outside of their scheduled meetings. He welcomed her, despite the late hour, and they talked at length about her fears and doubts. On November 30th, 2022, Sarah noticed that her meetings with Father Michael were beginning to have a positive effect on her inner state. She felt more confident and calm, which helped her better cope with the tension at home. However, despite this, the problems in her marriage with Tom did not disappear, and the arguments continued. On the evening of December 5th, 2022, after an especially severe argument with Tom, Sarah returned to the church where Father Michael met her again. He suggested she spend the evening in prayer and meditation to find inner peace. That night was a revelation for Sarah, and she began to see Father Michael not just as a priest, but as someone who truly understood her pain. On January 1st, 2023, after the New Year holidays, Sarah and Father Michael decided to meet outside the church for the first time. They chose the Old Lighthouse Cafe, a cozy place on the outskirts of Annapolis, where they were unlikely to be recognized. Their meeting was filled with excitement and some awkwardness, but they quickly found common ground, discussing books and art. Their next meeting took place on January 5th, 2023, at the small bookstore Antique Books, where Father Michael and Sarah could talk freely while browsing old editions. This place was known only to a small circle of people, making it ideal for secret meetings. They spent a long time wandering between the shelves, discussing their favorite works and sharing thoughts on life. Their subsequent meetings became increasingly personal. They began walking along the deserted paths in Homewood City Park, where they rarely encountered passers-by. These walks allowed them to enjoy each other's company in seclusion. One day they even had a picnic by the lake, enjoying the quiet and tranquility. One evening on January 15, 2023, Father Michael suggested meeting at a small music bar, Jazz Corner, where local musicians often performed. The evening was spent listening to jazz melodies and quiet conversations. This meeting brought them even closer, allowing them to forget about their problems and worries, if only for a few hours. As time went on, their meetings became more risky. One day they decided to go to the nearby town of St. Michael's to spend the day away from Annapolis. They visited the local museum and strolled through the narrow streets, enjoying the atmosphere of the small seaside town. On January 25, 2023, Sarah and Father Michael found another secluded spot for their meetings, an old abandoned church on the outskirts of Annapolis. This place became their secret refuge, where they could spend time together without fear of being seen. They often brought a thermos of hot tea and sweets, spending evenings in conversation and prayer. Their relationship continued to develop. One evening, they met at the pier, rented a boat, and went for a short trip on Chesapeake Bay. It was particularly risky, but they couldn't resist the chance to spend time alone together in complete solitude. One of their boldest steps was meeting at the Old Wharf Hotel, where they rented a room for one night. They had pondered this decision for a long time, knowing that they were taking an even greater risk of being discovered. However, their desire to be together outweighed their fears, and they spent the night forgetting all their problems and worries. Their relationship grew more complex and emotional. They knew that their secret affair could lead to unpredictable consequences, but they couldn't deny their feelings. Each meeting became more important than the last, and they cared less and less about the possible risks. During those days, they began to understand that their relationship was crossing boundaries, but they couldn't stop. Sarah and Father Michael met in the old abandoned church on the outskirts of Annapolis, their favorite spot for secret rendezvous. That evening, they felt an especially close connection, and their conversations grew more personal and intimate. After a long talk, they couldn't resist and kissed, forgetting everything else. Peter Randolph, a parishioner of St. John's Church, happened to be near the abandoned church that evening. He often walked in that area, enjoying the peace and solitude. That day, he decided to visit the old church to take some photos for his blog about abandoned places in Annapolis. Peter entered the old church, not suspecting there might be people inside. As he walked in, he heard muffled voices and laughter. Curious, he followed the sound and soon saw Sarah and Father Michael standing in one corner of the church, tenderly embracing and kissing. Stunned by what he saw, Peter froze. He didn't know what to do. His mind told him it was wrong, but he couldn't believe his eyes. Trying not to make a sound, he took a few steps back to leave the church without being noticed. However, he stepped on a discarded bottle, which rolled loudly across the floor. The sound made Sarah and Father Michael turn sharply. They saw Peter standing a few meters away, shocked and embarrassed. Fear and panic flashed in Father Michael's eyes. Realizing their secret was out, he stepped towards Peter, trying to explain and calm him down. Peter, realizing he'd been caught, tried to leave, but Father Michael stopped him, pleading to be heard. However, Peter was in shock and didn't want to hear any explanations. A tense scene unfolded as Peter began accusing Father Michael of betrayal and hypocrisy, reminding him of his priestly duties. Father Michael, feeling the situation slipping out of control, desperately tried to explain what had happened, but his words only fueled Peter's anger. Sarah, standing aside, tried to calm them both, but her words were drowned out in the chaos of accusations and justifications. Suddenly, Peter announced that he would tell all the parishioners and go to the police. Overwhelmed by panic and fear for his career and reputation, Father Michael stepped forward and, without thinking, grabbed Peter's arm to stop him. A struggle ensued, ending tragically when Peter fell, hitting his head on the stone floor and losing consciousness. Father Michael and Sarah watched in horror as Peter lay unconscious. Panic gripped them both, and they didn't know what to do. Father Michael checked Peter's pulse and realized he wasn't breathing. In despair and fear, they decided they had to cover up what had happened to avoid even bigger problems. Understanding there was no time to think and realizing the gravity of the situation, Father Michael made a decision. They had to hide what had happened to avoid further complications. Taking control, he told Sarah to help him move Peter's body to the church basement, which was rarely used and almost abandoned. They carefully carried Peter's body down the stairs, trying not to leave any traces. In the basement, amidst old church belongings and dust, they found an old chest where they placed the body. After closing the lid, they stood silently, realizing what they had just done. Still in shock, Father Michael and Sarah returned to the main hall of the church. Father Michael tried to calm Sarah, telling her they needed to be cautious and act as if nothing had happened. He assured her that they must continue living their normal lives to avoid suspicion. The next morning after the tragic incident, Father Michael woke up with a heavy heart. He had to conduct the morning service at St. John's Church. He knew he had to remain calm and not show his emotions. Sarah, barely coping with her guilt, also planned to attend the service to avoid raising suspicion. The church gradually filled with parishioners. Father Michael stood before the altar, trying to focus on his sermon. His words sounded calm and confident, although he was in turmoil inside. He spoke of forgiveness, mercy, and hope, trying to hide his inner turmoil. After the service, several parishioners approached Father Michael, wanting to talk about their problems and seek advice. He listened to them with apparent attentiveness, trying not to reveal his inner tension. Sarah, still in shock, tried to stay close to other parishioners to avoid drawing attention. The next day, Father Michael decided to check the basement to ensure Peter's body was well hidden. He found an old lock and secured the chest where the body lay. Then he removed any traces that could indicate a recent incident. His thoughts kept returning to that moment, but he tried to maintain composure. Sarah continued coming to the church, but her state grew increasingly anxious. Father Michael saw how hard it was for her to cope with her guilt and tried to support her. He spoke with her privately, convincing her they had to keep living their normal lives and avoid being exposed. That day, the police came to the church. They reported receiving a missing person report for Peter Randolph. Father Michael replied that he had last seen Peter at the service a few days ago. He answered their questions confidently, trying not to show his anxiety. Sarah stood aside, silently observing the conversation. The police continued their investigation, interviewing parishioners and checking possible places where Peter might have been. Father Michael felt the tension rising but tried to remain calm and help the police without raising suspicion. He knew that the slightest mistake could lead to their exposure. Despite the internal tension, Father Michael continued to fulfill his duties at the church. He conducted services, gave advice to parishioners, and supported them in difficult times. Each day, he immersed himself more deeply into the role of a caring priest, hoping their secret would remain undiscovered. The police investigation yielded no results, and the case of Peter's disappearance began to fade. Father Michael and Sarah realized that their secret might stay hidden if they were cautious. However, the guilt continued to torment them both. Father Michael tried to console Sarah, assuring her that they had done the right thing to protect themselves and their lives. On March 5, 2023, Tom began noticing changes in Sarah's behavior. She became more distant and often secluded herself in her room, which worried him. Her late returns from church and frequent absences started to arouse his suspicions. Tom tried to question her, but she evasively answered that she simply needed personal time and support. One evening when Sarah said she was going to an evening service, Tom decided to follow her. He watched as she left the house and headed to the church. When Sarah went inside, Tom remained standing outside, pondering why his wife spent so much time at the church. Tom noticed that Sarah was receiving more messages on her phone, which she tried to hide. He saw her secretly reading them and quickly putting her phone away. Her behavior became increasingly suspicious, and Tom decided to find out who she was communicating with. One evening, Tom discovered Sarah's phone left in the kitchen. He seized the moment and looked through her messages. Among them, he found several messages from Father Michael, discussing their meetings and conversations. These messages made him question the true nature of their relationship. Tom decided to confront Sarah directly. He expressed his suspicions and asked what was really going on between her and Father Michael. Frightened and not wanting to reveal their secret, Sarah assured him that their relationship was purely spiritual, and that Father Michael was just helping her cope with her inner problems. Despite Sarah's assurances, Tom couldn't shake off his suspicions. He began tracking her movements, especially her visits to the church. One evening, he saw her leave the house and head towards the old abandoned church on the outskirts of town. He followed her at a safe distance. When Tom got closer to the abandoned church, he saw Sarah go inside. He decided to wait outside, hoping to see what would happen next. After some time, he saw Father Michael approach the church and go inside as well. This sight only strengthened his suspicions. Tom began secretly gathering information. He questioned the church's parishioners, trying to learn more about Sarah and Father Michael's frequent meetings. People mentioned how often they saw Sarah at the church and how much time she spent with Father Michael. These conversations only fueled his suspicions. Tom decided it was time for decisive action. He felt he needed to expose Sarah and find out the truth about her relationship with Father Michael. That evening, when Sarah said she was going to another meeting at the church, Tom decided to follow her and confront Father Michael directly. On April 1st, 2023, Tom took action. That evening, he came home early to catch Sarah before she left. When Sarah announced she was going to the church, Tom insisted on going with her. She couldn't find any excuses and agreed, knowing this could lead to trouble. When they arrived at the abandoned church, Tom insisted on going inside with Sarah. She tried to calm him, saying it was just spiritual conversations, but he was adamant. They entered the church, where they were met by a surprised and wary Father Michael. Inside the old church, an oppressive silence reigned. Father Michael tried to greet Tom and invited him to join their conversation. But Tom, unable to contain his anger, directly accused them both of betrayal and infidelity. His voice echoed through the empty building, reflecting the full force of his fury. Sarah tried to intervene, begging Tom to calm down and listen to her explanations, but he wouldn't listen. In desperation and rage, he lunged at Father Michael, pushing him against the wall. Father Michael, stunned by the unexpected attack, tried to defend himself and calm Tom down, but his words didn't reach him. The struggle between Tom and Father Michael grew more intense. Tom shouted about betrayal, about how his wife and the priest had betrayed his trust. His blows became increasingly strong and uncontrollable. Father Michael tried to defend himself, but the odds were against him. In a fit of rage, Tom grabbed the first thing he could find, an old crucifix hanging on the wall. He swung it and struck Father Michael. The blow was so strong that the crucifix shattered, and Father Michael fell to the floor, losing consciousness. Blood streamed down his face, and Sarah screamed in horror when she saw this. Sarah rushed to Father Michael, trying to stop the bleeding and bring him to consciousness. Tom, realizing what he had done, froze for a moment, watching the scene. His face reflected a mix of rage, fear, and regret. He took a step back, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. Sarah, in tears and panic, screamed at Tom, accusing him of just having killed a man. She begged him to call an ambulance, but Tom stood there, seemingly in a trance, unable to move. His mind was overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, and he couldn't make the right decision. Finally, realizing the gravity of the situation, Tom rushed to the exit of the church. He knew that the police and an ambulance would be there soon, and that his life, as well as Sarah's, had changed forever. Sarah stayed with Father Michael, desperately trying to save him, praying and hoping that help would arrive in time. Sarah sat on the cold stone floor of the abandoned church, holding Father Michael's head on her lap. Blood continued to flow from the wound on his head, staining her hands red. Father Michael was unconscious, and Sarah understood that there was no time to waste. Her hands trembled, but she knew she had to act. Gathering her courage, Sarah took out her phone and dialed the emergency number. Her voice was trembling and panicked as she told the operator what had happened. She explained that there had been an attack and that the priest was seriously injured. The operator tried to calm her down and asked her to stay put until help arrived. Sarah sat next to Father Michael, trying to keep him conscious while waiting for the ambulance and police to arrive. She spoke to him, whispering words of comfort and prayers, hoping it would help him survive. Time seemed endless, and every sound echoed through the empty church. Finally, she heard the sirens in the distance. The sound brought her both hope and fear. She knew the approaching help could save Father Michael's life, but it also meant the end of her life as she knew it. She kept praying that everything would turn out okay. The police were the first to arrive. As they entered the church, they quickly assessed the situation. One officer approached Sarah and asked what had happened. Her words were jumbled and filled with fear, but she managed to explain that her husband had attacked Father Michael in a fit of rage. The ambulance arrived almost immediately after the police. The paramedics began administering first aid to Father Michael, checking his vital signs and stopping the bleeding. They quickly realized that his condition was critical and that he needed to be transported to the hospital urgently. The police continued to question Sarah, trying to gather as much information about the attack as possible. She was in shock but tried to answer all their questions, understanding that it could help the investigation. At the same time, she was worried about Father Michael's condition and hoped he would survive. The paramedics carried Father Michael out on a stretcher and quickly loaded him into the ambulance. Sarah watched as they drove away, feeling helpless and crushed. The police continued to question her, trying to uncover every detail of what had happened. Her voice was quiet and trembling, but she answered honestly. The police informed Sarah that her husband Tom would be found and detained for further investigation. They offered to take her to the station to give an official statement. Still in shock, Sarah agreed, understanding that it was the only right thing to do. On April 2nd, 2023 at 5:00 a.m., Father Michael regained consciousness in the hospital. His head throbbed with pain, and memories of the incident flooded back, causing him horror and confusion. He realized that his situation was critical and that the police would soon start asking questions. Panic overtook him, and he began contemplating how to avoid the inevitable consequences. Knowing he would soon be interrogated, Father Michael decided to flee. He carefully removed the medical equipment he was connected to, and despite the pain, quietly left the room. The hospital corridor was silent, and he managed to exit through the back door without encountering any staff or security. Once outside, Father Michael quickly headed towards the nearby forest. He knew the area well, having often come there for solitary prayers and reflections. The forest seemed like the only place where he could hide and plan his next steps. In the forest, Father Michael felt slightly calmer. He found a secluded spot among the dense trees and sat on a fallen log, trying to catch his breath. His thoughts raced as he tried to find a way out of his desperate situation. He knew the police would be searching for him and that he had little time to come up with a plan. Feeling weak from his injuries and exhaustion, Father Michael decided to set up camp in the forest. He gathered some dry branches and leaves to create a makeshift shelter. Lying on the cold ground, he reflected on his actions and how everything had gone wrong. His mind was filled with prayers, mixed with thoughts of guilt and repentance. While Father Michael hid in the forest, the police launched an extensive search. An alarm was raised, and a large-scale operation began to find him. Helicopters and search teams with dogs were deployed to comb the area. Father Michael heard the distant sound of helicopters and knew his time was running out. He continued to hide, trying not to attract attention. He moved slowly, careful not to leave any tracks and avoiding open spaces. His wounds ached, and he felt his strength waning. He realized he couldn't last much longer, but the thought of surrendering to the police frightened him even more. Later that afternoon, Father Michael found a small cave where he could hide and rest. He gathered some water from a stream and looked for something to eat. His body needed rest and nourishment, but his mind was focused on one thing: how to avoid arrest and punishment. In the evening, Father Michael heard voices and footsteps nearby. He realized that the search teams were closing in, and he needed to move quickly. He decided to go deeper into the forest, hoping to find a safe place to hold out a little longer. His thoughts were full of despair and fear, but he couldn't give up. When night fell, Father Michael found another hidden spot among thick bushes. He decided to stay there for the night, hoping the darkness would help him evade his pursuers. Lying on the cold ground, he tried to stay warm and alleviate the pain. His thoughts kept returning to how he had ended up in this situation and what to do next. On April 3, 2023, at 6:00 a.m., search teams equipped with thermal imaging devices and supported by helicopters resumed scouring the forest, hoping to find Father Michael. The night search had yielded no results, and tension among the police was rising. They knew every hour was crucial and that the injured fugitive couldn't survive long without medical help. One of the search helicopters spotted a heat signature matching a human size in dense undergrowth at the base of a hill. The signal was relayed to a ground team, and several officers headed to the location. Father Michael, hearing the approaching helicopter, tried to hide deeper in the bushes, but his strength was failing. The police surrounded the area where Father Michael was hiding. He heard their voices and knew he had been found. The officers slowly approached, calling for him to come out with his hands up. Father Michael, realizing he could no longer run, stood up and emerged from his hiding place, swaying with weakness. He was apprehended without resistance, handcuffed, and immediately provided with medical attention. Father Michael was taken to a local hospital where he received the necessary medical care. His condition was stabilized, but the doctors insisted he remain under observation. Police officers guarded his room, waiting for the opportunity to begin questioning him. Father Michael, weakened and exhausted, lay silently, contemplating his future. On April 5, 2023, after Father Michael's condition had stabilized, he was transferred to a prison hospital where he continued to receive treatment under strict supervision. That day, detectives came for the first official interrogation. Realizing the seriousness of his situation, Father Michael decided to cooperate with the police, hoping to mitigate his punishment. On April 10, 2023, Father Michael was transferred to a maximum security prison to await trial. He was charged with assault, causing grievous bodily harm, and evading justice. The investigation continued to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and analyze clues. Sarah was also called to testify, which was a harrowing ordeal for her. On April 20, 2023, preliminary hearings began in Father Michael's case. Prosecutors presented the charges and evidence, including Sarah's testimony and other witnesses. Father Michael's lawyer tried to mitigate the situation, arguing that his client had acted in a state of passion and had no intention of causing harm. The judge set a date for the main trial. On June 1, 2023, the trial began in the Annapolis District Court. The courtroom was filled with journalists, parishioners, and local residents, all following the case with great interest. Prosecutors presented their evidence and called witnesses to support their version of events. Father Michael appeared worn out but maintained his composure, answering questions calmly. On June 15, 2023, Sarah gave her testimony in court, recounting how her meetings with Father Michael began and how the incident occurred. Her testimony was key to the case, and prosecutors used it to show Father Michael's motives and actions. The defense tried to cast her testimony in a different light, arguing that the events could have been misinterpreted due to Sarah's emotional state. On June 30, 2023, after weeks of hearings and considering all the evidence, the judge delivered the verdict. Father Michael was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The decision evoked mixed feelings among those present. Some saw it as just, others as too harsh. On July 1, 2023, Father Michael was transferred to a prison to serve his sentence. His life had changed drastically, and he now faced spending the rest of his days behind bars. The Annapolis community tried to recover from the shock of these events and restore their faith in their spiritual leaders.
Boston 911.
I need EMS.
Tell me exactly what happened.
My friend is staying with me, and I just walked in, and she's laying on the bathroom floor, and I don't know what happened. I can't tell what happened.
In May 2022, the world of cycling and the public were shaken by a tragic story that later became known as the Love Triangle case. On May 11, 2022, in Austin, Texas, Anna Moriah Mo Wilson, a talented professional cyclist, was found shot to death. At the center of this scandal were three key figures: professional cyclist Anna Moriah Wilson, her alleged rival Caitlin Armstrong, and the man who connected their fates, Colin Strickland. The story of their relationships, the investigation, and the trial were filled with dramatic twists that captured the attention of not only the media, but also the general public. Caitlin Armstrong was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. From a young age, she stood out among her peers for her athletic achievements. At Stevenson High School in Livonia, she played volleyball and participated in track and field, which shaped her determination and discipline. After graduating from high school, she continued her education at Eastern Michigan University, where she earned her degree. In 2022, Caitlin moved to Austin, Texas, to start a new chapter in her life. She obtained a real estate license and worked as a yoga instructor, combining her professional career with her passion for a healthy lifestyle. It was in Austin that she met Colin Strickland, a professional cyclist, and began a romantic relationship with him. Their relationship was filled with passion and complexities, marked by frequent breakups and reconciliations. Caitlin sought stability, but Colin, absorbed in his cycling career, was often away. These fluctuating periods in their relationship fostered deep feelings of insecurity and jealousy in Caitlin. Caitlin's determination to achieve her goals was evident not only in her professional and athletic pursuits, but also in her personal life. She was committed to maintaining her relationship with Colin at any cost, which ultimately led to tragic consequences. Anna Mariah Wilson, known to her close ones as Mo, was born in Littleton, New Hampshire. From a young age, Mo stood out for her athletic talents and determination. Recognizing her potential, her parents actively supported her passion for sports. Even during her school years, she proved to be an exceptional athlete, participating in various track and field and swimming competitions. In school, Mo excelled not only as a talented athlete, but also as a successful student. Her perseverance and hard work led to high achievements both academically and athletically. These qualities helped her earn a scholarship to Dartmouth College, where she continued her sports and academic pursuits. At Dartmouth College, Mo discovered her passion for cycling. She began competing in local races and quickly gained recognition for her outstanding performances. Her determination and willingness to train hard made her one of the leading young cyclists in the country. Mo specialized in gravel races, which demanded not only physical endurance, but also strategic thinking. Beyond sports, Mo was known for her cheerful personality and openness. She made friends easily and was always ready to help others. Her social media was filled with photos from races and travels, where she shared her experiences and achievements with her many followers. In 2021, during a break in the relationship between Caitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland, Mo started dating Colin. Their relationship was brief but left a significant impact. Colin and Mo remained in contact after their breakup, occasionally meeting for joint training sessions. These meetings became the catalyst for the tragic events leading to her murder. Anna Mariah Wilson was tragically killed on May 11, 2022. Her life, full of achievements and promise, was cut short suddenly and brutally. The memory of Mo lives on in the hearts of her friends, family, and all who knew her. Her story serves as a reminder of the importance of combating jealousy and violence in relationships. In 2021, during a break in Caitlin and Colin's relationship, Mo and Colin began dating, which later became a catalyst for tragic events. The stories of these two women intertwine with Colin Strickland, ultimately leading to a dramatic conclusion.
Austin Police!
Do I stop?
What?
I don't know what happened. I just walked in on her.
Sit up.
Caitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland were in a relationship that frequently broke off and then rekindled. Their connection was far from perfect, and during their breaks, Colin sought solace in other relationships. During one such break in 2021, Colin started dating Anna Mariah Wilson, marking the beginning of a love triangle. Colin and Mo Wilson hit it off immediately. Both were passionate about cycling and often spent time together, training and participating in races. Their relationship became known within the cycling community, which did not go unnoticed by Caitlin. Armstrong found out about these meetings when Colin and Mo began openly posting photos together and sharing their achievements on social media. When Colin and Caitlin got back together, he assured her that his relationship with Mo was just a fleeting romance. However, Caitlin's jealousy only intensified. She began to suspect that Colin was still in contact with Mo. These suspicions were confirmed when Caitlin discovered that Colin and Mo continued to text and occasionally met for joint training sessions. Caitlin became obsessed with uncovering every detail of their interactions. She tracked their activities through fitness apps like Strava to know exactly where and when they met. On one such day, she learned that Colin and Mo had spent the day together, which triggered a wave of rage in her. The couple's relationship grew even more strained after Caitlin found out about another meeting between Colin and Mo. This incident was the final straw, igniting intense jealousy and a determination to eliminate her rival. The situation escalated, and Caitlin felt she was losing control over her relationship and her future. On May 11, 2022, using the Strava app, Caitlin learned that Colin had picked up Mo for a joint training session and spent the day with her. In the evening, Caitlin, driving her Jeep Grand Cherokee, began circling the neighborhood where Mo was staying with friends. Caitlin saw Colin drop Mo off at home after dinner and then head to another part of town. Sometime later, around 8:37 p.m., Caitlin approached the house where Mo was. She took advantage of an opportunity to enter when the door was unlocked or used a copy of the key that Colin might have had. Once inside, Caitlin headed to the bathroom, where Mo was likely getting ready for the night. In the bathroom, filled with rage and desperation, Caitlin shot Mo several times with a 9mm handgun. 3 bullets pierced Mo's body, killing her instantly. Caitlin then quickly fled the crime scene, returning to her vehicle. Around 9:45 p.m., Mo's friend returned home and discovered her body in the bathroom, immediately calling the police. Law enforcement officers arrived quickly and began their investigation.
Austin Police!
Do I stop?
What?
I don't know what happened. I just walked in on her.
Sit up.
No. She doesn't live here.
What's her name?
Her name is Mariah. Mariah is her middle name. Her first name is Anna.
You said she's from San Francisco?
Well, she's from Vermont, but she's living in San Francisco.
And she came to visit you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's here for a bike race this weekend.
You know if she's talking to anyone or any friends? I know you say you don't freaking live here.
Yeah, I knew she was with her friend Colin.
Colin, what's Colin's last name?
Colin Strickland. I left to go have dinner with my friends, and then I came back, and this is my house.
That's your house.
This is my house. She's staying with me.
Did you see a gun or anything like that in there when you were
Why
in
is
there?
there a bullet casing?
Reviewing surveillance footage from cameras in the area, the police spotted Caitlin's vehicle circling the house for several hours before the murder. The next day, May 12, 2022, the police obtained a warrant to search the home of Caitlin and Colin. During the search, they found a handgun that was later identified as the murder weapon through shell casings found at the crime scene. However, due to a lack of direct evidence linking Caitlin to the murder, she was initially arrested on a minor theft charge. Realizing that the evidence against her was mounting, Caitlin understood that staying in Austin was becoming increasingly dangerous. Taking advantage of a quick opportunity to get cash, Caitlin decided to sell her Jeep Grand Cherokee. On May 13, 2022, she met with a buyer and sold her vehicle for $12,000 in cash. This step was crucial for her escape plan. The money provided her with the resources needed for an urgent departure and the start of a new life outside the U.S. Immediately after selling the vehicle, Caitlin began planning her next moves. She knew the police would be searching for her, so she needed to act quickly. Caitlin decided to head to Houston, where she hoped to blend in with the large population and find a way to leave the country. On May 14, 2022, using the cash, she bought a plane ticket to New York City, where her sister lived. In New York, Caitlin planned to use her family's help to further her escape. She avoided using credit cards or any other traceable methods that could lead to her being found. Upon arriving in New York, Caitlin met with her sister, who might not have been aware of her plans or the severity of the situation. Armstrong used her time in New York to think about her next move and prepare for fleeing the country. She knew that with each passing day, the net was closing in and time was working against her. This realization pushed Caitlin to take more radical measures to evade justice. Caitlin Armstrong flew to Costa Rica using fake documents under her sister's name. She settled in the small coastal village of Santa Teresa, a popular spot among tourists and expats. This location was ideal for blending in with the numerous visitors. To change her appearance and make identification more difficult, Caitlin spent $6,000 on plastic surgery to alter the shape of her nose. She also dyed her hair and used other methods to modify her look. After the surgery, her face was covered in bandages, and her lips were swollen, which helped conceal her true identity for a while. Living in Santa Teresa, Caitlin adopted a new name, Ari, under which she introduced herself to locals and tourists. She found work as a yoga instructor, which allowed her to earn a living without arousing suspicion. Caitlin actively participated in the local community, frequented cafes and restaurants, and tried to behave like an ordinary resident of the peaceful resort town. However, her stay in Costa Rica did not go unnoticed. Locals began to suspect something was amiss when they noticed her strange behavior and frequent talks about the U.S. Additionally, her post-surgery appearance drew attention. During this time, American authorities were actively searching for her and had reached out to local law enforcement for assistance. Caitlin continued living in Santa Teresa, trying to adapt to her new life, but she knew she could be caught at any moment. Despite all her efforts to hide and start anew, she couldn't completely shake off the fear of being exposed. Since Caitlin Armstrong's arrival in Costa Rica, U.S. law enforcement had been actively working to locate her. Through international cooperation and tips from local residents who reported her suspicious behavior, the search was narrowed down to the small village of Santa Teresa.
Well, Caitlin, I know her as Ari. Don't really know Caitlin or the face. I've seen her like the Caitlin. Ari was a strange person, but I met her right outside the tattoo shop, Good Life Tattoos, and her friends were getting tattooed, so she was waiting out there on the bench, and I was out there having a beer in the lounge, and it became apparent to me that she was trying to have a conversation, trying to get to know me. So then I started talking to her more and more, and then we ended up sharing numbers, and we're gonna hang out later, and we ended up hanging out a bunch of times later. And we went on a couple dates, but she said that she had just been through a real traumatizing breakup, and she hadn't healed from it yet, and wasn't ready to get close at all, so we were just being friends. And she wanted to go out to different places. We went out to a bunch of different spots, but most of the time she wanted to kind of be a secluded spot, not a lot of people. And I didn't put any of it together. You wouldn't imagine it, but after it all happened, went by, and you hear what she was really doing and running from, it made sense why she didn't want to be seen, why she wanted to go to real secluded places, and it all kind of made a little more sense. They were using the old pictures, and I was like, oh, I don't know her. But then afterwards, they did the updates of the pictures of when she had her face lift or face change, and I was like shocked. I was like, what? That was who I've been hanging out with this whole time, and yeah, it sucks for the family that lost their sister and daughter, and that's really not cool, and I feel for them. And I didn't get to meet her. The person I met was Irie, it's Katie.
American authorities reached out to local police for assistance in apprehending the fugitive. Numerous interviews were conducted with residents and business owners in the area. The locals, who had noticed her changes in appearance and unusual behavior, became key witnesses in the investigation. On July 23, local law enforcement, along with representatives from U.S. authorities, organized an operation to arrest Caitlin. They meticulously planned the arrest to minimize risks and prevent any possible escape. Police surrounded Don John's hostel, where Caitlin was living and working under the name Ari. When officers entered the building, Caitlin was in her room. They found her with a bandaged face and altered appearance from the plastic surgery, but she was still recognizable. The police presented her with an arrest warrant, and Caitlin did not resist.
Caitlin Armstrong was captured on June 29th by foreign officials in the Republic of Costa Rica, where she was detained on an immigration violation and deported back to the United States. Armstrong fled the Austin area days after being interviewed. Armstrong was detained by authorities at the Don John's Hostel located in Santa Teresa Beach following a 43-day fugitive investigation. She dyed her hair brown, she cropped her hair shorter, and had a bandage on her nose where she claimed it was from a surfboard incident.
After her arrest, Caitlin was taken to the local police station for further processing and preparation for extradition to the U.S. The operation to apprehend her was the result of coordinated efforts between international law enforcement agencies and local residents, leading to the successful conclusion of the long search for Caitlin Armstrong. On October 11, 2023, Caitlin Armstrong was in a police convoy headed for a medical examination. Upon arrival at the medical facility, she seized the moment when her guards were distracted. Caitlin bolted and ran down the street. The guards pursued her, but she demonstrated impressive physical fitness, acquired through her yoga and fitness training. She covered about a mile before attempting to scale a 20-foot fence. However, the maneuver was unsuccessful. Police caught up with her at the fence, and after a brief struggle, Caitlin was apprehended again. Her escape attempt caused a significant public stir, drawing attention to her case and prompting increased security measures during her continued detention. This incident underscored the seriousness of the situation and added drama to an already tense story. The police heightened their surveillance of Caitlin to prevent any further escape attempts. On October 29, 2023, the trial of Caitlin Armstrong began. The case attracted significant media and public attention. The court sessions were held at the Travis County Courthouse in Texas. At the first session, the defense attempted to argue that the evidence was insufficient to charge Caitlin with first-degree murder. The prosecution, however, presented an extensive array of evidence, including surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and ballistic reports. Throughout the trial, numerous witnesses were called to testify, including neighbors, friends of Mo Wilson, and ballistics experts. Caitlin's defense tried to discredit the witnesses' testimonies and argued that the prosecution had not provided enough proof of her guilt. One of the key moments in the trial was the testimony of the ballistics experts, who confirmed that the gun found in Caitlin's home was the murder weapon. Surveillance footage showing Caitlin's vehicle near Mo's house on the day of the murder was also presented. After several weeks of intense court hearings, where both sides presented their arguments and evidence, the jury retired to deliberate. This long-awaited decision captured the nation's attention. The jury, consisting of 12 members, spent several days discussing all the presented facts and evidence. They carefully reviewed the surveillance footage, ballistic reports, witness testimonies, and the defense's arguments. The deliberation was tense, as Caitlin Armstrong's fate depended on their verdict. On November 16, 2023, the jury returned to the courtroom, ready to deliver their verdict. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with journalists, the victim's family, and members of the public present. When the judge asked the jury foreman for the verdict, he announced that Caitlin Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted with emotions. Anna Mariah Wilson's family couldn't hold back their tears, expressing their gratitude for the justice served. Caitlin remained calm, though her face showed a mix of despair and resignation. Her lawyers immediately announced their intention to appeal, but this did not change the current situation. The jury concluded that the presented evidence, surveillance footage, ballistic data, and witness testimonies clearly pointed to Caitlin Armstrong's guilt. This verdict marked a significant milestone in this complex and emotionally charged case, emphasizing the importance of justice and legality in the judicial system. The judge issued the sentence on November 20, 2023. Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This sentence marked the conclusion of a high-profile case that captured the nation's attention. Caitlin was sent to the Dr. Lane Murray Unit Prison, where she will serve her sentence. The trial of Caitlin Armstrong left a profound impact on the public consciousness, serving as a reminder of how jealousy and obsession can lead to tragic consequences.
In accordance with the verdict that the jury has rendered, this court hereby sentences you to 90 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and a $10,000 fine as imposed by the jury.
In the unforgiving realm of biotech, Jennifer Ashcroft, a remarkably stunning 52-year-old, had amassed her fortune. Her enterprise led the charge in brain interface technology, with Jennifer renowned for her incisive mind and unwavering resolve. She navigated life with the assurance of one who invariably achieved her desires, be it in the corporate world or personal life. Ryan Breslin, a 20-year-old with striking, moody features, seemed an improbable partner for the elegant and refined Jennifer. A college dropout with a checkered past, Ryan had meandered through a string of unfulfilling jobs until a fortuitous meeting with Jennifer altered his life's course. Their liaison, though unorthodox, seemingly provided both with what they yearned for. Jennifer found a youthful companion to ward off solitude, while Ryan gained financial stability and a glimpse into a world of opulence hitherto unknown. For almost a year, their understanding thrived in the shadows of Riverton. Yet as summer waned into autumn, a shift in their intricate dynamic would trigger a sequence of events culminating in violence, leaving the community to confront the sinister undertones that had long lurked beneath its immaculate facade. Jennifer Ashcroft's journey to affluence and influence commenced in Boston's middle-class suburbs. Born to a high school chemistry teacher and a librarian, young Jennifer exhibited an early knack for science and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge about the human mind. Her parents, acknowledging her promise, made sacrifices to offer her every educational advantage within their means. At 16, Jennifer's life pivoted dramatically when her science fair project on neurotransmitters captivated a visiting MIT professor. Struck by her prodigious skill, he became her mentor, shepherding her through accelerated learning and into MIT's esteemed neuroscience program. Here, Jennifer's ambition truly soared. In the midst of her graduate pursuits, Jennifer's investigation into neuroplasticity caught the eye of several biotech pioneers. By 25, she had obtained her first patent, and a burgeoning company specializing in brain-computer interfaces thrived under her command. Its stock value surged as technological advancements grabbed headlines. With each triumph, Jennifer's affluence and sway expanded, but so did her notoriety for relentlessness. Ex-colleagues whispered of her aptitude to captivate and manipulate, to pinpoint frailties and exploit them without remorse. Jennifer's personal sphere was characterized by a succession of fleeting marriages, each dissolving as her partners found themselves eclipsed by her genuine ardor. Her profession. Her initial spouse, a fellow scientist she encountered at MIT, endured 3 years before petitioning for divorce, alleging emotional abandonment. The subsequent, a captivating venture capitalist, reached year 5 before Jennifer's mistrust of his fidelity resulted in a bitter separation. Following her third divorce at 48, from a younger art dealer who asserted she had grown obsessively domineering, Jennifer renounced conventional bonds. Instead, she started to pursue the companionship of significantly younger men, enticed by their vivacity and the straightforward essence of purely business-like agreements. This routine suited her, enabling her to sustain dominance while fulfilling her requirements for camaraderie and physical closeness. Yet as Jennifer neared her 50s, an encroaching sense of isolation started to plague her. It was this susceptibility, meticulously concealed beneath her gleaming facade, that would render her vulnerable to the heady appeal of Ryan Breslin and the devastating envy that ensued. Ryan Breslin's formative years presented a stark disparity to Jennifer's. Hailing from a modest town in rural Pennsylvania, Ryan was the youngest of 4 offspring in a family perpetually wavering on the brink of destitution. His father, a long-distance trucker with a proclivity for liquor, was seldom present. His mother, grappling with depression, fought to maintain the family's buoyancy. From adolescence, Ryan learned self-reliance. Bestowed with handsome features and innate allure, he discovered these assets could be wielded to his benefit. By the time he reached high school, Ryan had mastered the skill of coasting with minimal exertion, leveraging his charm to compensate for academic lapses and disciplinary troubles. Despite his unimpressive scholastic record, Ryan's SAT scores were remarkably high, suggesting an intellect he seldom directed towards his studies. Coupled with his basketball acumen, this secured him a scholarship to a small liberal arts college in Philadelphia. Yet the liberties of college life presented irresistible temptations for Ryan. Beyond the vigilant gaze of family and high school educators, he fell in with a crowd that prioritized partying. His grades nosedived, and by the conclusion of his freshman year, Ryan had forfeited his scholarship. Too embarrassed to retreat home, he opted to remain in Philadelphia, oscillating between menial jobs and relying on friends for accommodation. During this directionless phase, Ryan's trajectory crossed with Jennifer's. Employed as a barista in a high-end cafe patronized by corporate executives, Ryan captured Jennifer's attention one drizzly Tuesday morning. She was drawn to his effortless grin and the trace of vulnerability concealed behind his assured manner. For Ryan, Jennifer embodied all he aspired to, refinement, achievement, and the allure of a life distant from his modest roots. Their preliminary flirtation swiftly matured into something deeper. Jennifer, captivated by Ryan's untapped potential and eager to mold him into her perfect consort, presented him with a proposal. She would furnish him with monetary backing and usher him into her realm of opulence and cultivation in return for his exclusive company. Confronted with escalating debts and diminishing opportunities, the offer was too enticing to decline. Capitalizing on the moment, Jennifer extended an invitation for him to accompany her to a gallery inauguration, her demeanor signaling this was more than a casual request. The gallery inauguration signaled Ryan's initiation into Jennifer's sphere. She appeared at his rundown apartment, gifting him a bespoke suit that fit flawlessly. Throughout the soiree, Jennifer deftly steered Ryan, murmuring insights about the artwork and presenting him to her associates as her youthful protege. For Ryan, the night was exhilarating. He effortlessly assumed the part of the captivating, artistic young man, buoyed by the admiring looks and stimulating dialogues with Jennifer's contemporaries. As hours passed, their mutual allure intensified, culminating in an ardent rendezvous at Jennifer's penthouse. In the aftermath, Jennifer detailed her offer. She would furnish Ryan with a substantial monthly stipend, fund his education should he opt to resume college, and expose him to prospects he had only fantasized about. In exchange, she demanded his companionship, discretion, and exclusivity. Ryan, perceiving an opportunity to remake himself and flee his aimless life, consented without delay. The ensuing months were a flurry of activity for Ryan. Jennifer relocated him to the guest residence on her estate, revamped his wardrobe with designer attire, and acquainted him with life's luxuries. She registered him for art appreciation courses, engaged a personal trainer to refine his already notable physique, and schooled him in the subtleties of wine appreciation and gourmet dining. Jennifer derived immense satisfaction from sculpting Ryan, regarding him as both a venture and a treasured asset. She basked in the jealous glimpses they garnered at social functions, proudly flaunting her alluring young escort. For Ryan, the alliance provided both stability and thrill. He immersed himself in his new persona with zeal, eager to validate his worth and sustain the lifestyle he was swiftly embracing. Their intimate connection was fervent and daring, with Jennifer introducing Ryan to encounters he had never envisioned. She tested his limits, perpetually retaining command, a dynamic that permeated other facets of their bond. As the summer season yielded to autumn, Jennifer and Ryan established a cadence of opulent holidays, social gatherings, and cozy nights in. To external observers, they seemed an eccentric yet contented duo. Nevertheless, beneath the facade, tendrils of codependency and fixation were entwining, priming the stage for impending chaos. The equilibrium of Jennifer and Ryan's bond began to waver with the advent of Arya Thornton, a 20-year-old art history scholar at the nearby university. Arya slipped into their lives unassumingly as a part-time guide at the Museum of Modern Art. Ryan first crossed paths with Arya during one of his regular museum trips, a routine fostered by Jennifer to deepen his artistic acumen. Arya was conducting a tour, her fervor for the artworks apparent in her lively portrayals and perceptive analyses. Ryan was captivated by her zeal, so distinct from Jennifer's strategic valuation of art as an emblem of prestige. Post-tour, Ryan approached Arya, engaging her in a dialogue about the exhibit. Their exchange was effortless, interspersed with mutual laughter and an unmistakable sense of rapport. For the first time in months, Ryan felt genuinely acknowledged for his true self, rather than as Jennifer's adjunct. Arya, with her dynamic demeanor and contagious laughter, epitomized all that Jennifer was not. Where Jennifer was refined and reserved, Arya was impulsive and demonstrative. Her youthfulness and vigor resonated with Ryan, evoking memories of the unadulterated connections he had forsaken for his pact with Jennifer. Over subsequent weeks, Ryan found himself frequenting the museum more often, invariably coordinating his visits with Arya's work schedule. Their camaraderie burgeoned swiftly, united by mutual enthusiasms in art, music, and philosophy. Arya welcomed Ryan into her realm of collegiate soirees, independent film viewings, and late-night discourses in round-the-clock eateries. For Ryan, these exchanges with Arya and her companions were invigorating. He rekindled aspects of himself that had been stifled in his alliance with Jennifer, including his own artistic ambitions. Arya inspired him to pursue his fascination with photography, even bestowing upon him a vintage camera she had unearthed at a flea market. As Ryan devoted more hours to Arya, he commenced questioning the essence of his bond with Jennifer. The glaring disparity between the authentic link he shared with Arya and the businesslike character of his pact with Jennifer grew increasingly conspicuous. He caught himself fabricating pretexts to avoid the estate, his mind perpetually wandering to Arya. Little did Ryan know, his evolving conduct and escalating distraction hadn't escaped Jennifer's notice. Her sharp intuition, sharpened by years of corporate navigating, detected a shift in their dynamic. As Ryan withdrew, Jennifer's resolve to retain her grip on him merely strengthened, establishing the groundwork for the dispute that would ultimately culminate in calamity. The initial indicators of discord were understated. Jennifer observed Ryan checking his phone more regularly, his expression illuminating at specific dispatches. He started to linger at the museum more frequently, attributing this to a fresh zeal for modern art. Though Jennifer initially supported this interest, a gnawing doubt started to take hold in her psyche. One evening, as they readied for a philanthropic soiree, Jennifer nonchalantly inquired about Ryan's museum excursion. His reply brimmed with enthusiasm, replete with particulars about a novel exhibition, but it was the reference to Arya, the extraordinarily well-versed docent, that piqued Jennifer's interest. The manner in which Ryan's eyes gleamed as he spoke of her triggered warning signals in Jennifer's mind. Resolute to expose the reality, Jennifer started to surveil Ryan more intently. She installed a GPS tracker on his phone under the pretense of an enhanced security measure and engaged a private detective to tail him during his outings. The accounts she received substantiated her direst apprehensions. Ryan was spending substantial time with a young lady, their bodily communication signifying a palpable attraction. As indications of Ryan's deepening bond with Arya accumulated, Jennifer's envy smoldered. She vacillated between frosty aloofness and clinging despair, her temperaments growing ever more erratic. In one instance, she would lavish Ryan with lavish presents. In the next, she would subject him to indirect aggression and concealed menaces. Jennifer's conduct began to impinge on her vocational life as well. She found herself preoccupied during crucial conferences, snapping at staff for trivial offenses. Her assistant observed an uptick in her liquor intake, frequently discovering vacant wine vessels in her workplace bin. Unable to suppress her misgivings any further, Jennifer accosted Ryan following an exceptionally delayed evening excursion. She insisted on knowing his whereabouts, charging him with violating her confidence. Ryan, taken aback, endeavored to minimize his camaraderie with Arya, asserting that Jennifer was exaggerating. The dispute swiftly intensified, with Jennifer reminding Ryan of all she had accomplished for him and implying that he was indebted to her for his fidelity. This confrontation signified a pivotal moment in their relationship. Ryan, feeling ensnared and embittered by Jennifer's proprietorship, started to retreat more. He grew more protective of his phone, meticulous in avoiding mentions of Arya, and concocted intricate justifications for his absences. Jennifer, fueled by her escalating distrust, redoubled her efforts to dominate Ryan. She insisted on joining him at artistic functions, her territorial demeanor conveying an unmistakable signal to any who neared them. She took him by surprise with unplanned museum visits, her piercing gaze probing for any indication of the youthful guide who had captivated Ryan's interest. As time passed, the emotional rift between Jennifer and Ryan expanded. Their formerly ardent meetings turned perfunctory, underscored by a current of animosity. Jennifer's jealousy metamorphosed into a fixation, eclipsing her thoughts and propelling her to ever more desperate tactics to retain Ryan at her side. Little was she aware that her obsessive affection was estranging Ryan further, propelling them both towards a clash that would bear fatal repercussions. As Jennifer's envy escalated, she launched a deliberate crusade to sustain her grip on Ryan, leveraging the strategic acumen that had established her as a commanding businesswoman. She wielded an array of manipulative strategies intended to keep Ryan reliant on her and secluded from Arya's sway. Jennifer's initial maneuver was to capitalize on Ryan's fiscal reliance. She started to curtail his stipend, referencing fabricated complications with her finances or asserting the need to redirect resources for corporate aims. When Ryan voiced apprehension, she would yield, but not before securing vows of heightened devotion and shared time. Emotional manipulation emerged as Jennifer's chief armament. She alternated between bestowing Ryan with tenderness and subjecting him to extended spans of frosty silence. This capricious conduct left Ryan perpetually unsteady, never certain of his footing. Jennifer also utilized subtler schemes to segregate Ryan from potential support networks. She arranged excursions that conveniently overlapped with Ryan's arrangements with acquaintances. She voiced apprehension about his former companions, insinuating they were negative influences or merely exploiting him for his newly acquired position. Progressively, Ryan's social sphere contracted, leaving Jennifer as his main wellspring of fellowship and affirmation. In instances of perceived menace, Jennifer would remind Ryan of her magnanimity, portraying her domineering conduct as expressions of affection and benevolence. She would recollect how she had extricated him from a life of penury and anonymity, suggesting that without her, he would amount to nothing. These guilt-laden narratives bolstered Ryan's sense of duty and indebtedness to Jennifer. As Ryan persisted in distancing himself, Jennifer's strategies grew more frantic. She commenced feigning health alarms, alleging stress-triggered migraines or blackouts that mysteriously aligned with times Ryan desired solitude. Her act was so persuasive that Ryan frequently abandoned his plans out of authentic worry for her welfare. Through this labyrinth of manipulation, Jennifer strove to forge a reality where Ryan believed he required her, where his self-sufficiency was steadily undermined until remaining with her appeared to be the sole feasible choice. Yet with each controlling move, Jennifer edged Ryan closer to his limit, igniting a bitterness that would soon erupt with catastrophic ramifications. During one of her covert probes into Ryan's history, Jennifer unearthed a secret she believed would grant her ultimate sway. Through her web of private detectives, she discovered that Ryan had been implicated in a vehicular collision during his freshman college year. The incident resulted in grave harm to another student, but Ryan had fled in a frenzy. The case had stagnated due to insufficient evidence, yet Jennifer now possessed the missing fragments. Equipped with this incendiary knowledge, Jennifer meticulously strategized her tactic. She awaited an instant when Ryan was particularly defenseless, following a fiery dispute about his escalating detachments. As Ryan moved to depart, Jennifer casually referenced the accident. His complexion paled as he slowly rotated to face her. Jennifer detailed the particulars with icy exactitude, presenting police records. She clarified that she held ample proof to resurrect the case and incriminate Ryan. The implicit menace loomed dense in the atmosphere. If Ryan defied her desires, she would surrender the data to law enforcement. The disclosure devastated Ryan. The accident had been the impetus for his collegiate decline, the remorse gnawing at him for years. He had persuaded himself that by abandoning his former existence, he could outrun his past. Now that delusion was brutally torn away. Jennifer exploited her leverage, offering Ryan an ultimatum. He could rededicate himself to their bond, sever all connections with Arya, and adhere to Jennifer's dictates explicitly, or she would divulge his secret, demolishing his life and potentially consigning him to incarceration. Cornered and desperate, Ryan initially capitulated to Jennifer's mandates. He ceased museum visits, disregarded Arya's increasingly anxious communications, and transformed into a virtual captive within Jennifer's opulent confines. Jennifer reveled in her triumph, convinced she had ultimately guaranteed Ryan's steadfast allegiance. Nonetheless, the strain of the extortion soon commenced to exact its toll on them both. Ryan grew reticent and despondent, his once radiant persona dimmed by the incessant anxiety of living under duress. He performed the rituals of their relationship, but the allure that had initially captivated Jennifer was snuffed out. Jennifer, in turn, discovered that her triumph brought an emptiness. The ardent, defiant young man she had grown fond of was supplanted by a compliant husk. She wavered between remorse for her deeds and exasperation at Ryan's apathy. As time wore on, the household tension escalated to intolerable levels. Ryan's animosity smoldered just beneath the surface, while Jennifer's suspicion burgeoned. She grew convinced that Ryan was conspiring against her, seeking to nullify her advantage. The circumstance was unsustainable, a powder keg awaiting a spark that would arrive in the guise of a fortuitous meeting, propelling Ryan to his boundaries and initiating the ultimate fatal clash between him and Jennifer. The impetus for the final showdown transpired on a brisk autumn evening. Jennifer had compelled Ryan to attend a gallery inauguration, flaunting him before her associates like a trophy. As they navigated the gathering, Ryan's gaze met a familiar visage across the chamber. It was Arya, radiant in a vintage gown, her presence a jarring reminder of the liberty and authentic bond he had forsaken. Before Jennifer could respond, Ryan muttered an excuse and hastily exited the gallery. He found himself roaming the avenues, his thoughts whirling. The chance encounter with Arya had roused something within him, a ferocious yearning for emancipation, a recollection of the individual he once was and could become again. When Ryan ultimately returned to the estate in the small hours of the morning, he encountered Jennifer awaiting him, her countenance a facade of icy wrath. The ensuing quarrel was unlike any preceding it. Ryan, emboldened by his epiphany and no longer acquiescent to her dominion, confronted Jennifer about her manipulation and extortion. Jennifer, perceiving her hold on Ryan slipping, deployed her ultimate gambit. She reminded him of the evidence in her possession, threatening not only to disclose his history, but to employ her sway to demolish any prospective future. She depicted a vivid tableau of the devastation awaiting him should he dare to abandon her. Yet rather than intimidating Ryan, her menaces merely bolstered his determination. In a moment of lucidity, he comprehended that no future with Jennifer, irrespective of its opulence, was worth the cost of his spirit. With a serenity masking his inner chaos, Ryan informed Jennifer of his departure, consequences notwithstanding. Jennifer, confronted with the reality of losing Ryan despite her utmost endeavors, lost control. What transpired next would stun the community and forever alter both their lives. As Ryan moved to exit, Jennifer's poise disintegrated entirely. With a primordial shriek of fury and despair, she launched herself at him, her immaculate nails gashing his visage. Ryan, caught unawares by the abrupt brutality, staggered backward, toppling an antique vase that fragmented on the marble floor. The resonance of splintering porcelain seemed to drive Jennifer deeper into hysteria. She seized a weighty crystal decanter from the bar trolley and swung it at Ryan's head. He evaded it, the decanter missing him by a hair's breadth and crashing against the wall, dousing them in glass shards and costly scotch. Ryan, grasping the severity of the circumstance, attempted to restrain Jennifer, imploring her to pacify. But Jennifer was beyond logic. She lashed out, shrieking incoherently about treachery and ingratitude. Amidst the scuffle, they careened into Jennifer's cherished art compilation, canvases collapsing around them. As they wrestled, Jennifer's grasp closed around a letter opener on her desk, an ominous, ornate instrument more akin to a weapon than an office utensil. She thrust it towards Ryan's torso. He managed to deflect the assault, but the blade carved deeply into his arm, unleashing a spray of blood. The vision of blood seemed to briefly jolt Jennifer back to reality. She recoiled, the letter opener slipping from her abruptly limp fingers. Ryan, gripping his wounded arm, spied a chance to flee and bolted for the exit. But Jennifer, in a final frantic act, seized his injured arm, tugging him back with unexpected force. Ryan, driven by pure instinct and adrenaline, pushed her away vigorously. Jennifer lurched backward, her heel snagging on the rug. Time appeared to decelerate as she toppled, her head colliding with the edge of the substantial marble hearth with a nauseating thud. Jennifer collapsed onto the floor, a pool of blood swiftly expanding beneath her hair. Ryan stood paralyzed, his mind grappling to absorb what had just transpired. The chamber, so lately a scene of tumult, was suddenly horribly still. With quivering hands, Ryan searched for a pulse, detecting none. The realization struck him like a tangible blow. Jennifer was deceased, and his life as he knew it was concluded. In a stupor, he stumbled from the residence into the crisp night air, abandoning a scene of devastation that would soon become the focus of a sensational inquiry. The grisly finding was made by Jennifer's housekeeper, Elodia Ramirez, early the following day. Her shrieks upon discovering her employer's lifeless form shattered the peaceful morning quietude of Riverton, summoning neighbors and triggering a flurry of calls to emergency services. Detective Lydia Blackwell, a seasoned member of the Riverton Police Department's homicide unit, arrived at the scene within the hour. The lavish living room, now a spectacle of brutality, narrated a tale of ferocious conflict. Shattered glass crunched beneath her feet as she conducted her preliminary assessment, observing the upturned furnishings, fragmented artifacts, and the streaks of blood guiding to Jennifer's remains by the fireplace. As crime scene investigators inundated the house, Detective Blackwell commenced reconstructing the events of the preceding night. Surveillance footage depicted Ryan escaping the residence in the wee hours, his shirt marred by blood. His hasty vanishing cast him as the chief suspect, prompting an all-points bulletin for his apprehension. As the probe advanced, a more intricate image surfaced. Interrogations with personnel and associates disclosed the stormy essence of Jennifer and Ryan's bond. Numerous witnesses recounted regular disputes and voiced unease about Jennifer's increasingly unpredictable conduct. A pivotal discovery occurred when investigators unearthed Jennifer's concealed dossiers, chronicling her inquiry into Ryan's history. The proof of extortion introduced a fresh aspect to the case, implying that Ryan may have acted out of desperation rather than premeditated slaughter. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed on the lam, with sightings documented statewide, yet he evaded seizure. The investigation's turning point emerged from an unanticipated quarter. Aria Thornton, tormented by remorse over her part in the happenings, presented vital intelligence. She furnished detectives with text communications and voicemails from Ryan, documenting Jennifer's intensifying actions and his escalating dread. Aria's account portrayed Ryan as a casualty of manipulation and maltreatment, ensnared in a gilded prison by Jennifer's affluence and menaces. This novel outlook spurred Detective Blackwell to delve further into Jennifer's past, exposing a sequence of compulsive behavior and accusations of harassment from her former liaisons. Forensic evidence from the crime scene started to validate Ryan's account of events. The trajectory of Jennifer's lethal wound aligned with an accidental tumble, and protective injuries on her hands indicated she had been the assailant in the ultimate clash. Perhaps the most incriminating evidence stemmed from Jennifer's own digital trail. A meticulous inspection of her computers unveiled the full scope of her surveillance of Ryan, encompassing GPS tracking data and footage from concealed cameras within their residence. The degree of intrusion and dominion startled even the most veteran investigators. As the genuine character of Jennifer and Ryan's connection emerged, public sentiment commenced shifting. The portrayal of the avaricious young paramour yielded to a more intricate comprehension of a youth ensnared in an abusive scenario. Initially indicted for second-degree murder, Ryan's case took an unforeseen turn as evidence of Jennifer's manipulation and abuse accumulated. The district attorney's office encountered escalating pressure to reassess the accusations. Following protracted discussions and bargaining with Ryan's legal counsel, the charges were lessened to manslaughter. After weeks of testimony and 3 days of consideration, the jury delivered their decision. Ryan was pronounced culpable of involuntary manslaughter, a verdict that acknowledged his part in Jennifer's demise, while also recognizing the mitigating factors that culminated in the deadly encounter. The judge, considering Ryan's absence of prior convictions and the extraordinary conditions of the case, handed down a sentence of 5 years in prison with the prospect of parole after 3. The ruling evoked varied responses, some deeming it overly indulgent, while others contended that Ryan had already endured sufficient hardship.